Hey guys, and welcome, or maybe welcome back to my channel. My name is Monique, and this is Art with Mo. I previously sketched out a little portrait from Pinterest, and today I will be using markers and colored pencils to give it some color and bring it to life. Alright, so let's get started. I'm going to be using my Bianyo markers, and I will also be opening up Pinterest on my iPad so that I have my reference. I want to make sure that my colors are accurate, so I'm going to go to my swatch page so that when I pick my markers, they are on point with the reference that I'm going off of. I also grabbed some micron pens for her eyes and eyelashes, and the sizes that I'll be using are 01 and 02. So let's get back to the portrait. And right now I am using a kneaded eraser so that I can erase some of the blue off of the sketchbook, and that way I can still see my sketch, but also when I start coloring like so, I'll still be able to see my sketch underneath. And I start off by coloring in her face and her neck and shoulders, and the only thing that I can say so far with these markers is that there is a little bit of streaking, but I'm not too sure if that's because of the paper or because of the markers. So once the sketchbook is done, which is really close, I'll be able to test it out on my new sketchbook. So keep a lookout for the sketchbook tour that should be coming up soon. Next, I will be coloring in her hair with the second darkest gray shade that I have laid out, and I forgot to add a piece of paper, so let me add that right now. And her hair is now all colored in, and I'm going back to the lightest gray that I used for her skin tone, and I'm just darkening up some of the shadows around her eyes with the marker. And then later on, when I feel like I need to deepen up the shadows, then I will use the second darkest gray like I did for her hair previously. now that I feel like her skin tone is pretty dark, I'm going to go in with my next darkest shade and darken up right underneath her neck so that there is more depth in between her actual face and her neck. So I will also be waiting for that first layer on her skin to dry. So if I need to go back and darken it up, I will. But I'm going to be using that same gray tone, the very lightest gray tone. And right now I'm just darkening up the shading of her neck so that it blends a little bit better. And I'm also going to darken up right underneath her lip. And I'm going to go back to the lightest shade once again and blend it all together. And I learned this trick from Natalie Maget, I believe that's how you say her name on Instagram. She also has a not a Facebook, but she also has a YouTube. So she'll go back and forth between her markers and she'll use the same tone that she used for her skin tone to add shading. And right now I'm just adding shading to her nose, and before that I added shading to her eyebrows and lips. And then I will go back to the lighter shade and kind of blend out her neck a little bit more because it was looking a little too bold, and I want it to be a soft transition in between the shades as much as possible. Next, I'll be using the Micron pen to darken up her eyes, and I believe this is the size 08 or possibly the 05. I try to go with the bigger Micron pen because the smaller they are, the harder it is for me to fill it in because the nib is a little small and I'm pretty heavy-handed, so I don't want it to break. And I'm going to go back and use the second darkest shade and darken up the corners of her eyes so that it gives her eyes a little bit of dimension and differentiation between her eyes and her skin tone. So I felt like I needed to darken up her hair because for me, if some of the values, like the major values, are off, it's going to make it harder for me to find the correct values in other places. So I darkened up her hair because in the reference, it's actually pretty dark. It's almost black except for like right in the center. And I'm trying to use like little lines across the middle of her hair to lighten it up, and I felt like I kind of messed up, so I just went back to the shade that was a little bit lighter to blend it out a little bit more. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth until I feel like her hair isn't so, I don't know how to put it, maybe bold or so uneven. Yeah, that's the right word, because right now her hair is a little uneven, so I'm just going to keep going back and forth in between my markers and trying to blend it out and make sure that her hair isn't so wild looking. And then I wanted to add some darkness to her eyebrows, so I just grabbed my Micron pen and used small strokes to add little hairs onto her eyebrows. Alright, so I felt like the marker portion of the portrait was pretty close, so I'm going to use my Arteza colored pencils to shade in the rest of her face. And I picked out some colored pencils, and I'm just going to swatch it on the back to make sure the colors that I picked are accurate and they are going to work out for her face. So I'm going to start out with adding some highlights with the white colored pencil, and I'm going to do it on her nose because that's normally how I work whenever I'm working digitally. I'll go from the nose so that I can work with the rest of her face and kind of line it up a little bit. And then I'm also using the colored pencil around her eyes to add some highlights and her mouth. Right, and then once I feel like I've got some of the highlights in, I'm going to go back to my gray toned colored pencil, and this one's the lightest one that I have. And I'm just looking back and forth in between the reference and my portrait to see where I can darken up some of the shadows and add a little bit more dimension so that she looks like the reference. And then I also go back to a darker tone so that I can kind of define her lips a little bit more, because the markers can really only do so much for me, because I've tried to just do a marker portrait and not use colored pencils at all, but it just didn't turn out very well, and I felt like it was really splotchy. And I'm happy that this time I used colored pencils because I was really able to get the form that I couldn't achieve with the markers. So I'm just going to continue to go back and forth between my colored pencils and seeing where I can add highlights and shadows into this portrait to make it have more dimension. And one of the things that I really like about art is that sometimes you have this really, really messy stage, but I've noticed if I keep pushing through, then I realize some things that I can change or do to make it look better. And even though it may look messy at some points, I know eventually it's going to look really good if I keep pushing through and working at little spots that I notice, and all those little spots that I notice, eventually it'll come together into a full piece. And that's something that I really enjoy. If you guys have been enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing at no cost to you, of course, and definitely give this video a thumbs up because I did have a lot of fun doing it. It was a little nerve-wracking because I have tried to record a portrait marker video before, but it just didn't turn out very well because at the time I only used markers. I didn't incorporate any colored pencils, but with this one I'm extremely happy because I was able to get the dimension that I was looking for and something that I really couldn't get with the markers. And I pushed myself to explore a different medium. I've definitely drawn with markers before as a kid, like any other kid, and I've used colored pencils before as well, but also when I was a kid or like in little coloring books. So I was really excited to do this, and once it's all finished, when you guys see, I think you will also be happy with it. Like I said before, if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up so I know what videos that you are interested in, and I'll make sure that I keep making those type of videos. Alright, so now that I've worked on the face for quite a bit, I'm going to go ahead and move on to her hair and try to figure out how to erase that light mark that I made and use the colored pencils to try to help me out to blend her hair out a little bit more. And that's also another thing that I really like with colored pencils because over marker you can almost erase all of the mistakes that you made. So I'm just going over with a black colored pencil and I'm trying to add in some hair strands. That's why I'm kind of making these short strokes with my wrist. And then once I get this all filled in, I'm also going to use a lighter colored pencil and add in some highlights to parts that I may have gone over too much with a marker. So I'm just going to keep going back and forth in between my black colored pencil and a lighter colored pencil to try to blend out the middle of her hair. Oh, yes, it is finally time for some highlighting. And actually, right now, I'm going around her face to kind of erase some of the marks that I made with the marker. Like her face on this side, I made it too wide, so I'm going over it with my white gel pen to kind of erase my mistake, which is pretty cool with gel pen and using white paper because voila, it's fixed and the proportions are a little bit better. So I'm going to add highlights to her nose, and then I dabbed it out a little bit to just try to blend it so that it wasn't too bright. I'm also going to use highlights around her eyes, her eyebrows, and then I'm going to give a little highlight to her pupil as well. So I'm just going to keep going back and forth and using my gel pen, and what I feel like needs to be brightened, I'm going to do that with my gel pen. And at times you'll see my hand go away because my gel pen didn't feel like working, so I just scribbled off to the side to make it work again. Alright guys, I am just about done with this portrait. I really hope that you enjoyed it because it was a lot of fun to make, and I'm so happy that it turned out the way that I wanted, especially for the third portrait that I've tried doing. The first one was in color, which was a bad idea because I had no idea what I was doing. And then the second one, the proportions were just way off. It was supposed to be a woman and it looked like a man. So I actually recorded that one, but I didn't like it, so of course I didn't post it. But I'm happy that you've made it this far. If you've liked this video, definitely consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much. Bye.